Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. York police releasing dramatic video tonight as they search for multiple suspects wanted in a suspected case of arson. Now, this after an auto repair shop in Vaughan was set on fire. Two people were inside at the time of the explosion, narrowly making it out. And as Julia Nope reports, it's just the latest in a rash of recent arson incidents in the area.
This surveillance video captured the moment Rolex auto collision was set ablaze. Broken glass remained scattered outside the Vaughan shop in the aftermath, along with police tape and a boarded-up door.
Obviously, it's very concerning, the absolute blatant disregard for human life in a case like this.
Police say they were called to the auto center near Highway 7 in the 400 early Monday morning. In the video, you can see a dark-colored sedan driving into a parking lot in front of the building. Two people then get out of the car. One walks to the front of the unit and ignites some sort of device which sets off the fire. Both suspects then get back into the vehicle where a driver is waiting and leave. Police say two people were inside the building at the time.
One of who had to escape from a second-story window, and the other was rescued by Vaughan Fire and Rescue.
Luckily, no one was injured, but Dixon says that easily could have been a different outcome.
Anytime there's fire involved, there's a danger not only to the public, but also the person wielding it.
This is the most recent in a rash of alleged arsons in the area. These are the moments before suspects set a pair of cars on fire on a residential street on March 22nd. The surveillance video shows two suspects getting out of their vehicle wearing dark-colored clothing and carrying a jerry can. A bright flash follows before the pair run back into the car and drive off. A month before that, another pair of cars on a street 4 kilometers away also set ablaze. Police don't believe any of the incidents are related, but are asking the public's help in tracking down the suspects.
Anyone that has any dash cam footage, any video surveillance in the area, or has any knowledge can reach out to our investigators.
Julia Nope, CBC News, Toronto.
More witnesses have been called to testify in the trial of Umar Zamir. Zamir is facing a first-degree murder charge in connection with the death of Detective Constable Jeffrey Northrup in 2021. Two people who were there during the confrontation between Zamir and police took the stand today. Greg Ross has the latest from the courthouse.
Umar Zamir is accused of running over Detective Constable Jeffrey Northrup with his car in the early morning hours of July 2nd, 2021. It happened not too far from where I'm standing right now, just in the underground parking lot over at City Hall. Now, this week, we really have started to get a better picture of what actually transpired that night. We know that there were a number of plainclothes police officers who were in the area investigating a stabbing around City Hall. Now, several of them approached Zamir, who was attempting to leave the parking lot with his family, his pregnant wife and his infant child. Now, a number of the officers who have testified in this trial say that they identified themselves as police, but the defense is taking the position that they did not. In fact, they're saying that Zamir did not know that these were police officers, and he didn't understand why these people were banging on his car and telling him to get out. Again, remember, these are plainclothes police officers. Now, Zamir attempted to pull out of his parking spot and leave the scene. That is when it is believed he ran over Detective Constable Northrup. A man and a woman told us they were here that night hoping that there was going to be some sort of Canada Day celebration. They were here for about 40 minutes, and they say when they realized that not much was going on, they were attempting to leave. It was just after midnight when they got to that pay station to pay on the way out of the parking garage. They said they were having trouble paying, and so they were stuck there. And that's when Zamir's car pulled up behind them, and they testified today that they heard that crash as that unmarked police van rammed into the back of Zamir's car, and then they heard there was a lot of commotion. They say that they heard a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming. They could hear somebody saying, "Get out, get out." And when they looked back, they say they saw two men get out of that unmarked police van. They say that they saw them draw weapons, and they say that's when they decided to get out of there. In fact, that couple said that they literally drove right through the parking arm that prevents people from leaving the parking lot without paying. When the defense asked them why they left, they said they were scared. In fact, the driver of the vehicle testified today that he thought he was going to die. Neither one of those witnesses testified that they heard any of the officers identify themselves as police.
And that was Greg Ross reporting from the Superior Court of Justice. To Baltimore now, where the bodies of 2 people have been recovered from the water, days after a container ship crashed into a bridge. Today, federal safety investigators started examining the ship's voyage data recorder. The head of the National Transportation Safety Board spoke about immediate priorities.
It's getting this perishable evidence that we need, the components, the electronic logs, any sort of paperwork, the pictures we need to take, anything we need to identify to take from the bridge structure itself.
Recovery efforts resumed this morning for the 6 construction workers who were on the Francis Scott Key Bridge when it collapsed early in the morning. They are all presumed dead. The ship lost power and issued a distress call moments before it hit, but it was moving too fast to change course. The bridge is a major commuter and commercial transport link, and the Port of Baltimore is critical to North America's supply chain. U.S. President Joe Biden has vowed to rebuild the bridge with federal funds. And closer to home, the Burlington Skyway has a similar design to the bridge in Baltimore. Chris Glover spoke to an expert about whether it could be vulnerable to a similar collapse.
After the horrifying bridge collapse in Baltimore, there are questions swirling around the world about bridge design and structural safety.
A similar example of a bridge here in the GTA is the Burlington Skyway.
Both bridges are similar lengths. Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge is about 2,570 meters. The Burlington Skyway just a bit shorter at 2,560 meters. Both are multi-lane highways carrying heavy loads of vehicular traffic daily. McMaster structural engineer Can Yang is an expert in bridge design, construction, and upkeep. She says the Baltimore and Burlington bridge designs make them even more comparable, with similar metal truss styles and a suspended deck for a highway.
In terms of some similarities for the design process, all the considerations, all the force calculations will be more or less similar. So I think the concerning part is not about the superstructure, it's like the upper part of this bridge, and it's more about the connections between the upper part and the vertical support, the column, the pier, and also how strong the column is designed to withstand this dynamic impact load introduced by the ship collisions.
Another critical issue with bridge design is the distribution of load. In the Baltimore example, not enough structural redundancies were in place. When one column collapsed, there was a domino effect to the entire structure.
So what structural redundancies are in place here in Burlington to protect this bridge from if one of those vertical columns goes down, the rest of the bridge stays up?
When we say redundancy, that means if the part of the bridge system fails, the whole bridge will still be able to find other paths to redistribute the force. For example, if we take this bridge pier, this column as an example, they have 2 columns, right? They have the 2 columns, and then once the ship hits one of them, we're very much hoping the other one will still be able to hold up the vertical force.
The Baltimore Bridge has piers or columns planted in the soil underwater, forming a critical part of its foundation. That mid-water foundational column is what was struck by the cargo ship on Tuesday, leading to the deadly bridge collapse.
Back here in Burlington, the columns are anchored in dry land, meaning the threat of a collision with a ship is dramatically reduced.
It's possible, like see if we have the flooding with the increased water level rise, or they just go really off track, and it's still possible to happen, but I was just for sure it's gonna be much lower than having the pier directly sitting in the water.
So this bridge location would have been picked to have an area where the 2 sides of the shore are closer together to allow not to have that intermediary piece in the middle.
Yes, exactly. So it's about site selection. It's also about designing the whole superstructure, the upper part structural systems to achieve that long span.
Maintenance is another important element. Being constructed of steel in the 1970s, corrosion will be investigated to determine whether it could have also played a role in the Baltimore disaster.
Engineers also will have estimation about how this damage will compromise the load carrying capacities.
Are you seeing any of those kind of maintenance issues with this bridge?
Well, we have the standard which is applied uniformly across the province to make sure all the bridges their condition are seriously monitored.
Welcome back. 7 Toronto men are facing 150 charges stemming from an auto theft investigation. Toronto police revealing the results of Project Paranoid today, where undercover officers infiltrated an organized crime unit. As Dale Manukduk reports, it's just one of the ways police are tackling the auto theft crisis.
That the Toronto Police Service,
surrounded by recovered vehicles, firearms, tools used for crime, and other high-end items, Toronto Police detailed 2 investigations dating back to 2023. It started with Project Spectre last April,
where police seized the 6 firearms you see before you, along with more than 200 grams of cocaine. Information obtained during Project Spectre led to a new investigation.
That investigation focused on the trafficking, shipping, and revinning of stolen vehicles and was called Project Paranoid. It launched in August.
Arrested 7 people and laid 150 charges. Project Paranoid demonstrates the resources that the Toronto Police Service is dedicating to tackling the auto theft epidemic.
As a result of Project Spectre and Project Paranoid, 48 stolen vehicles were recovered, 20 at a shipping location in Burlington, 20 in Toronto and Montreal with the help of Canada Border Services Agency, 3 through the execution of a search warrant, and these 5 vehicles were purchased by undercover officers who were in real danger.
We had undercover operators sitting in stolen vehicles, purchasing guns in stolen vehicles. So the danger is next level. The danger is next level for our undercover operators and for our members. It really is. And like I said, it's like Netflix.
The total value of the 48 stolen vehicles recovered was upwards of $4 million. So far this year, more than 2,400 vehicles have been stolen in Toronto, just under the pace of last year when over 12,000 cars were stolen, several with an element of violence as carjackings have also gone up. Police say it will take all stakeholders, including automakers and multiple levels of government, to make a real impact on the crisis.
Our police are asking for more tools, and we are going to be there for them.
As part of Ontario's 2024 budget released this week, the province is spending $95 million to combat auto theft, including 4 new helicopters to serve the GTA.
You want to have the ability not only to do covert undercover stuff, you also want to have the ability that when one of us has our vehicle or one of our family members has our vehicle stolen, you want to have that capability to properly respond.
Our unit can be up in the air within 2 minutes and heading to that call.
Toronto police don't have their own chopper, unlike Durham Region, which has been operating their air program for 25 years.
Because it's such a big area, the air support really assists us in our calls. Last year, there were over 800 calls for service for our air support. And just as a highlight within that, we were able to locate 147 people.
That includes calls related to stolen vehicles. The new provincial funding is over 3 years. It's unclear how soon the new 4 eyes in the sky will be up in the air. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
The back and forth between the federal and provincial governments over money for supportive housing continues. The feds say that Ontario isn't living up to its commitment, but Ontario's housing minister sees the issue differently. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop explains.
The federal Liberals say they won't hand over more than $350 million if the province won't build more affordable housing. The federal housing minister says Ontario has reached just 6% of its commitment, while other provinces have reached around 2/3 of theirs. The minister adds that the province then updated its plan to 28%.
I don't think it's responsible for me to transfer funding for the purpose of home building for homes that are never going to be built. We are going to work to find a way to make sure that the money that we have budgeted for affordable housing in Ontario helps build affordable housing in Ontario.
This follows a flurry of letters. The federal minister warning the province it may have to withhold the money. The province writing back saying that's unacceptable, threatening the most vulnerable, and that Ontario's situation is different, with older housing stock and a huge repair backlog, and that here it's municipalities who deal directly with affordable housing. Now, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario has also written a letter to the federal minister saying municipalities will suffer.
We remain willing to be at the table, but our position is not going to change. I'm not going to change laws. I'm not going to change decades worth of how we provide this type of housing. They knew that this was how we delivered housing when the agreement was signed with the previous Liberal government in 2018, so this is not a surprise.
The provincial Liberals are holding the province to the same standard the Ford government has for municipalities, only rewarding ones that meet their housing target.
Have a plan, meet your targets, and we'll give you money. It's exactly the same thing Paul Callander is saying, and he doesn't want to live by his own rules.
We are so far behind. We are letting Ontarians down. And so the government needs to go to the federal government and say, what can we do to access this money? We need it. Absolutely, we need it. But we have to have a plan in place.
Neither side in this federal-provincial fight backing down.
If there is not a clear path for the Government of Ontario to satisfy the entirety of the commitment that they had agreed to with eyes wide open, then they should not expect to receive the full amount of money.
The federal minister says over the next few days, he'll be assessing Ontario's latest plan, as that April 1st deadline is looming. Lorenda Redicop, CBC News, Toronto.
Tenants at an apartment building near Yonge and Bloor have been without heat for weeks now. The city says it has issued an order to the company that owns the building to get the problem fixed. But as Sarah McMillan shows us, tenants say the company has left them in the cold for too long.
Space heaters have become the new normal for tenants at 16 St. Joseph Street. They haven't had central heat in their building for weeks.
It's long johns and 3 shirts on and toques and hoodies.
It's hard to shower or do basic needs or even cook, for heaven's sakes. I stand in my kitchen, it is a frozen icebox.
The building's corporate owner, Achilles, sent a notice to tenants on March 4th, saying the boiler has run its course and is beyond repair. The company says it had already installed a new electric heat pump system to replace the aging boiler, but says the electrical upgrade needed to operate the system hasn't yet been completed. Tenants were offered a rent rebate and were given small space heaters, but warned not to use them for long periods because of low electrical capacity in the building. A solution this tenant advocate says is unacceptable.
You're supposed to have heat in your apartment. That's what the law says. The law doesn't say that you have to have a space heater.
The building was built in 1927.
Since the heat went out, tenants tell CBC Toronto they've measured inside temperatures as low as 14 degrees. Landlords are required to provide heat to a minimum of 21 degrees. Local MPP Kristen Wong-Tam sent a letter to Achilles on the weekend, demanding action to ensure the health and safety of tenants, including providing nearby hotel rooms until heating is restored.
The tenants are shivering in their coat, they're getting sick, and some of them are getting sicker because they're already quite vulnerable, is actually not just immoral and unreasonable, but most importantly, it's illegal by way of property standards.
Yesterday, 3 weeks after the first notice to tenants and 2 days after the letter from Wong Tam, Achilles offered to pay for nearby hotel stays and says it's bringing in a generator this week to power up the heat pump. A company executive told CBC it takes the issue very seriously and says it took time to find a suitable generator and contractors to install it. Sarah McMillan, CBC News, Toronto.
And a reminder for news anytime, you can head to our website, cbc.ca/Toronto, or you can download the CBC News app. You are looking at a live shot of Toronto, mainly cloudy tonight, much like most of the day, currently sitting at 3 degrees. Let's go to meteorologist Colette Kennedy now with a look at your forecast. And Colette, not a lot of sunshine to go around today.
Yeah, that's right, Keldo. There wasn't a lot of sun to go around, but there were pockets of it throughout the day today. And if you had some of that, well, I hope you enjoyed it. Otherwise, it was mostly cloudy in terms of the conditions. But we're going to see our pattern kind of changing here as we get into what I call a blocking pattern. I'll explain that in just a moment here. But it will help us to be clearing out not only tomorrow, but through the overnight hours here and giving us sunshine then tomorrow. And the temperatures are going to be near seasonal for the next few days. I say mild just because at this time of year, a low is around -2. That would be a normal low, and a high of about 7. And we're going to be in that range. So we'll see that in the 5-day forecast. But first of all, the jet stream, which is often that dividing line of a cooler air to the north and a warmer air to the south, but also can show you a deep trough when we have a strong area or deep area of low pressure. And that's what we're seeing continuing over northern Ontario towards James Bay, and then a ridge
off the coast of Newfoundland, and between the two, with that ridge, it's kind of blocking this and keeping things from moving through. And we just happen to be near that dividing line, so that we're sort of on the favorable side in terms of being more under the influence of high pressure for the next few days. That helps out with the clearing. Overnight tonight, -2. Tomorrow, a high, I think it might be a little struggle, but up to 9 degrees that we'll be seeing. You can see on our imagery here as I roll this model forward, clouds kind of all having to go around. So there's still some activity and still some snow flying in northern Ontario, not as much as, of course, the last few days, but a few clouds here and there in southern and eastern Ontario. And that's about all we have as we move through Thursday and even through Friday as well. Your overnight temperatures, pockets of some cooler air. Otherwise, where you're closer to that ridge, the temperatures are actually milder into parts of eastern Ontario for those overnight lows. Here we go as we move towards the holiday weekend. All right, so for Good Friday, 7 degrees, becoming at times a little more variable. Early in the day, a lot of sunshine though. Saturday, a mix of sun and cloud, 8 degrees. And then you see what's happening here. As we've been moving forward in time, I keep looking at Sunday and Monday, and yeah, I have to pull those showers in to the forecast on Monday now.
All right, thanks so much, Colette. Finally tonight, chocolate is fine, but Easter eggs filled with fruit and nuts and covered in flour and water, even better. At least that's what a pair of brothers in Germany think. These boys went searching for the savory treats at a zoo today. It was one of many activities zookeepers have introduced to keep the bears busy. As some of the bears' neighbors, like monkeys and mongoose, weren't quite as lucky. They had to settle for regular chicken eggs. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night.